DGTass. Dumb guys talk about smart stuff.
All right, welcome to the podcast. Dumb guys talk about smart stuff. I'm Barry.
I'm Heath.
And today we are talking about simulation theory.
We are. And are we in the Matrix?
Are we in the Matrix? What do you call it? You have a special. You call it something different than I call it.
Well, I was saying hyperreality, but I think that's more like our reality's distorted,
right?
Type of thing.
Well, I think our reality is definitely distorted, and that touches on the simulacra and simulation. The point that Boudreaux, or whatever that guy's name was talking about, that wrote that book. He's the author, by the way.
Yeah.
He was basically, I think his points is that our reality is basically a copy of the last people's reality. You know, like, we basically saw what people did before us and we're repeating it.
Yeah. Also, he talks about, and just to give you an idea, we saw this book in the Matrix.
Right.
Neither one of us read the whole thing, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
I didn't read any of it.
Oh, well, by the way. I kind of searched the internet and found a whole bunch of clips, and I read for about 2 hours. So 2 hours worth of reading of the book. My
research was listening to other people talk about it. I think I got it down though. I know what he was getting at.
Okay. And so he talks about, say, like, if you build a map just like reality, and eventually the reality crumbles, the map starts to fade away, which one's real? And like if the map becomes so like reality, that's just like it.
Right, you're kind of like what came first, the map or reality itself.
And it kind of went into like the Disneyland type of thing of, say, like, there's the real world, then there's Disneyland, which is a small model of a world, but what's real is childishness exists.
Oh.
So it's kind of like you get all these layers of what is the real just within our little existence.
Right. Which could expand out, to the infinite number.
And one thing that kind of blew my mind was it talks about Watergate.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. And so it basically said, Watergate to us was a revelation of scandal. But he said, no, it's a revelation there is no scandal. It's hiding that there is no scandal. So what if, and the way I took it, and to apply to more modern politics that maybe comes later, say, what if Republicans and Democrats are working together?
Right.
And they're creating this...
They create an illusion.
They create an illusion that, like, say, like, they're doing what they want, but they coming to the public going, well, I can't because the Republicans are stopping me.
Right.
Like, say,
They're creating a conflict that doesn't really exist to control the masses.
Yes, and so it's creating this hyper-reality of, like, we are all fired up, watching Fox News, watching these other things, and talking about who we're going to vote for, and we're so depressed when our guy doesn't win or so happy when he does win.
And it doesn't really matter.
But what if it doesn't matter? What if they're working together? And isn't it kind of odd lately? Like, if you go back to the last several presidents, how it's Democrat, Republican. It's almost like they're taking turns.
Right, yeah. They've got some kind of under-the-table deal where they're like, well, we got to keep, it's a balance, right? Because they have to keep both parties strong. Because if one party is way stronger than the other one, then there's absolutely no conflict there. Yeah. Because one just dominates the other.
And see, like, looking at that, the true thing that you can get behind is having a third party to throw that off.
Yeah, right. And why isn't there a third party out there?
Yeah. And like there was Ross Perot when Bill Clinton won the presidency.
Yep.
And since then they made rules to make it harder for a third party to join.
Really?
They can't take part in the presidential debates and a few things. I heard this.
Yeah.
And that's why you haven't seen another Ross Perot since then.
That's interesting too. And I think the other reason is because you've got these diehards that are either Democrat or they're Republican. Nobody wants to jump ship. Yeah. You've got other conflicts as well because, if let's say you're a Democrat, but you don't like the Democrat presidential candidate, but you're definitely not going to vote for the Republican. So now you're like, oh, do I vote for the third party? Well, now what you do is you think, am I just taking votes away from my Democrat and now the Republican's just going to win that much easier because I'm stealing that vote? They create all kinds of scenarios where you have to have two parties or it's going to be a landslide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that you can get into, say with this hyperreality, or what he's talking about in simulacra and simulation, is capitalism. And this is kind of a rabbit hole I went down myself after reading the book and then thinking a lot about the book afterwards. Is say for example, the reality is it's cold outside. You need a shirt. So you go get a shirt to be warm. But capitalism teaches you need to have a brand name on it,
right?
Or you're nothing. Or it teaches you need to buy, what Michael Jordan wears or LeBron James wears. You
got to drink Sprite if you want to jump high.
Yeah, but then that creates almost a hyper reality of like a shirt's not just something to keep you warm anymore. It's a status.
Yeah.
It shows how much money you have.
Mm-hmm.
It shows how cool you are.
Well, and this comes down to also the reality that was created by the people before us, by the generations before us.
Mm-hmm.
The generations before us made that a thing, making wearing a Nike shirt means something. So now the next generation just immediately latches onto that,
mm-hmm.
and now it is a reality. Whereas
mm-hmm.
before, maybe in the 1800s, that wasn't a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody cared what kind of cowboy hat you wore or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But now, if you wear a hat that doesn't have a Nike logo, well, you're a douche.
Yeah.
So we've kind of created that and copied it
mm-hmm.
Over time.
Yeah, and can people now go back to that before? It's like, could you let a person, like, a couple hundred years ago, people could go in the woods, cut down trees, build a fire, build a log cabin. Now we've had this hyper reality come to where all we think about is like the logo on our shirt. Could you let that person go in the woods again and do the same thing?
Right.
Where they sit there and just freeze to death the first night and die.
Well, they probably would. I know. I probably would.
Yeah.
When I think of the whole simulation theory or simulated reality, my mind starts to boggle a little bit, because you could just really think, long and hard about our reality, about what is real, and we think of real as things that we touch, things that we see, but these are all just interpretations of what our brain is doing. And the other interesting thing about that, we all have brains, and our brains are the ones that do this. But what if my brain's different than yours?
Yeah.
What if what you see as blue, I see as yellow?
Yeah. And like you're just told, like, this is yellow, but everybody sees the yellow different.
Right. Yeah.
Which that's a real common question.
That is a real common question. I've thought about that since a little kid.
Yeah, and the whole status thing. I mean, all that just, it creates this like almost a deceptive reality, I think, that you don't realize that you're in it.
Right. I kind of went down the rabbit hole a little bit in looking at the simulated reality and the simulacra and simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I found was that I thought was really interesting was the dream argument. There's some kind of psychologist out there that came up with this, but it was, he asked the question, he says, if I dream that I am a butterfly and then I wake up, am I really the butterfly dreaming? Was I really a butterfly when I was dreaming? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like when I'm dreaming, is that reality? And then when I wake up, am I having a different reality, or am I just the dream of that reality?
Yes, and we'll say that there's even those realities that say you get so immersed in something. Say like a video game. You play it, you get so into it, and you beat it, and it's like,
now
it's
what?
over. It's almost like waking up from a dream sometimes.
Yeah, right.
So like there's people that have that depression after seeing Avatar.
Oh, right.
We both hate that movie. So.
Yeah.
But some people were into it so much that when they left the theater and they're no longer at whatever the world was called that movie's at, they were depressed.
Yeah, right.
And so it's almost like they're so wrapped up in that movie, it was like a reality for a little bit.
Yeah. That's the argument that comes into play when you start talking about this virtual reality. Mm-hmm. And I was just hearing on the radio about virtual reality, and the question was, it was about what's next in virtual reality, and is it basically you put on the the glasses, you go into this simulated reality basically, and you live your life. You do everyday normal stuff, but different than your everyday normal life. And if that technology gets to a certain point, is it going to be? Can we get lost in it? Basically, could there be a point where we're playing video games and we're running around, shooting at cops, and then we take off the glasses, we run outside and not realize that we're in waking life, thinking we're in the game, and we see a cop and we're shooting at the cop?
Yeah, I think we talked about Oculus one time.
Yeah.
And we said, what if they made like a video game to where it tricked you into thinking right away you woke up from the video game?
Oh, right. Like in the video game, the first thing you do is you have to take off your Oculus glasses.
Yeah, and it tricks you into thinking like I was just doing Oculus for like 5 minutes. And then you walk around and say you do something like it plays out a scenario where you're driving a car and you hit somebody with it. And you feel that guilt.
Right.
And you think it's real.
Yeah.
And then you wake up from the Oculus.
Right.
Like, and we're saying like we're at a point where we're making this Oculus, and to where we might be a few years from getting to that reality. What if the true reality is that we are people that have already played this out to conclusion, and we plugged ourselves in to the extent we don't know we're in it?
That's exactly the, that's the basis behind this whole simulation reality. It's like we're plugged in right now. We just don't realize it.
Yeah.
And it could come down to many things. It could be that somebody just plugged us into it. It could be that we could be levels down into this simulation, and this is it has been brought up several times before. But we could be a simulation of a simulation of a simulation that's being run by aliens because they want to see how these different things take place. And the interesting thing to think about that is that first simulation had to evolve to the point where it wanted to create another simulation and another simulation, just like we create simulations as humans in this world to see what's going to happen in the future. We simulate all kinds of things. I play video games where I simulate whole baseball seasons to see what happens and to see who has great seasons, and things like that. And that's kind of an example, because if we're a simulation and then we're simulating events, that's a simulation within a simulation.
Yeah, and I saw somebody say like a proof that we're in the Matrix is how effective running simulations are.
Right.
So an advanced civilization would have advanced simulations. This is so hard to say, but
it's tongue twister.
To where, say, like, you are basically living in a reality. If you're in this advanced simulation, preparing for this other reality, or to know how it would play out already in this other reality. So say, for example, I think we've talked about, say, like in Job, when Satan and Jesus get together. Satan and God.
Right.
And they go, what if this happened to Job? Would he curse you, or would he still praise you?
Right.
And they put him through all these torture tests.
Yeah.
Well, does that make more sense if we're in the Matrix?
That does make a lot more sense.
They're like, let's run the Job simulation.
Let's run the simulation. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and so it's almost like let's run the Job simulation and see if he has these trials type of thing.
Yeah, let's see what they do this time around.
Yeah.
That you actually brought up a good point, though, and I was going to ask you this. So I know that there's people out there just say this all the time, but what are some of the clues possibly out there that we are currently in a simulation, that we're not in reality, that we are in a simulated reality?
One thing, that the Matrix movie points out, deja vu.
Deja vu.
And I think we both said that we experienced this pretty strongly.
Yeah, and actually, since we talked about that the last time, I've been experiencing deja vu a little bit more than I was previously.
Yeah. You see that? I flipped my pen over and it landed perfect.
That was weird.
Yeah. But another thing, I just watched a quick presentation, was, say, like optical illusions. And say, like, those mind-bending drawings to where those ones that say, like, what color are the dots, and you stare at the dots and it looks like they're changing colors.
Yeah.
Or the ones that say, are the lines straight, or the ones that say, like, which line is longer, but they're both the same distance.
Yeah.
They're saying that that's a sign that there's a problem in the programming.
Right. Yeah.
Between, say, like the reality that's in front of our eyes and the way our eyes are programmed.
Yeah.
And that they're almost finding anomalies by those mental tricks.
Yeah. Another piece of evidence that you've brought up on several occasions is mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
numbers. Everything can be broken down in numbers, right? Everything is a program.
And it's almost creepy. The more advanced video games get, thinking it's broken down to ones and zeros is becoming more and more real.
Right.
To where you could see it down the road being hard to tell the two, but the computers are coming from ones and zeros.
Well, also, when you think about that, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a lot of it comes down to our perception. You know, I remember being a kid, maybe 12 years old, and going to the VHS rental store and going to rent not only movies but video games. And one of the big things was how good is the graphics. I always liked to see video games that had really good looking graphics. And I remember the graphics were just amazing on these Nintendo, Super Nintendo games.
Yeah.
And it's like, I thought those were good. And I remember playing one game, I think it was on regular NES system. It was called Narc. Did you ever play that game?
Oh, that sounds familiar.
It's about basically two guys who are narcs. It used to be a arcade game too.
Okay.
These two guys, one of them's red and one of them's blue, I think, and they're walking down and they're killing drug dealers and they're picking up sacks of cocaine and money, and like that was the whole point. You just walk through the streets. But I remember how fantastic I thought the graphics were. I was like, I can't even tell that that's not real.
Yeah.
But if I went and looked at that game now, I would laugh at how digitized and how stupid I must have been to think that.
Oh, yeah. I remember playing GoldenEye back in the day and thinking that was something new.
Yeah.
When I go back now, it's like the faces look like triangles and stuff
Right.
like that.
Yeah, it's like, what was I thinking back then? And the same thing goes for movies. Like, we thought that, the special effects in, movies years ago were fantastic. But now look at where we are. Look at the special effects that we're seeing today compared to then, and it's like, where are we going to be in the future? If we're thinking that what we see today is fantastic, what is it going to look like in the future, and how easy is it going to be for us to get lost in those realities?
Yeah, and another proof, I think, is how easily our minds are tricked. That we don't have great skills for defining what's real and what's not real.
Yeah.
I think with how we talked about hyperreality, and how easily we are tricked into, say, a commercial telling us we have to buy this shirt that's $100, rather than a shirt that's $5 that serves the same purpose.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I think if something's put in front of our eyes, and it's the only existence we know, I don't think we're strong enough people to say no.
I don't think our brains would be able to accept it. I mean, how many times have you been to a 3D movie where every time you have to reach in front of you to try and grab that thing because you think it's right there in front of you?
Yeah.
Even though you know it's not, you still reach for it.
Yes.
And that's the thing. Your brain is so, it believes it so much because because that's what it's seeing. But it's not real.
Yeah. And I almost think like both of us have pointed to, we really think there's a lot of things that point to there's more out there. And this matrix concept, I think, can kind of put it into terms for us to help us understand. In that we're looking at this small, we're wrapped up in our little reality, but there's things outside of it.
Yeah.
There's things like, say like you're playing the computer program, you're so engrossed in the screen, but who knows what your neighbor's doing?
Right. Yeah.
So
that brings us to the point. In Matrix terms, would you take the red pill or the blue pill? The red pill being you wake up and you realize that you've been in this simulation the whole time, and the reality you've come to know is not the reality. Or knowing there's another reality out there, do you take the blue pill just so that you can go back into peaceful oblivion?
Yeah, and so basically you're being like my Morpheus right now.
I am your Morpheus.
Yes. And
I'm not going to fucking tell you what happens if you take the other pill.
So you're just as much of a jerk as Morpheus was.
I'm just as much of a jerk. That is correct.
Yeah. And that's the thing of it is, just asking me that question makes me know there's more out there. And I have a hard time not going down the rabbit hole. So I honestly think, like, if that was presented before me, I would take it.
You think so?
I think so, although, say, like, you know that feeling of, like, I guess you experience it when you see the presence that we've talked about.
Right.
Of being paralyzed and not wanting to move.
Yeah.
Let's say the true Morpheus, whoever comes down, whatever it might be, aliens, angel, whatever, says, I'm going to show you everything. What if you feel that fear, that paralyzed, like, I can't handle this, my brain will blow up.
Right. Well, and you could always, point to scenarios like, okay, what if we are really just like vegetables in a wheelchair, like, and they've put us in this reality so that we can have brain function and experience life. You know,
say, like, go into the Matrix movie, were the enlightened people happier than the people in it?
Right. Yeah. Would we be the Joe Pantoliano character who is like, put me back in the Matrix, make me someone famous, but nothing too crazy. I want to be an actor. I just want to make millions and I want to eat juicy steaks, even though I know it's not real. Yeah. It would be a tough decision. I tell you what, that would really be mind blowing, because then we could sit here and talk about it all day long. We can theorize on what else is out there and are we in a simulation. But when that choice is put in front of us, and we have to make a decision of throwing away what we've got for the possibility of knowing what's out there, that's pretty crazy.
It is. And say, like, another factor is, say, like, I'm engaged right now, and what if our next existence we can't experience, like, those same feelings and things like that?
Right.
And I'd be walking away from that.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, perhaps your fiance, my wife and kids, they don't even really exist. They're just written into the code of this simulation. And if I decide to unplug, it's kind of like when I beat that video game. Oh shit, it's over. Yeah. What do I do now?
What do I do now? That person's gone. My whole objective is gone.
Right.
And that's why we were put into this.
Exactly.
Is to have an objective, to be... Because, say, like, we're people that die, and we know death is coming. And it adds an urgency to almost everything we do. Right?
Yeah.
Unless you're just not thinking about that.
Right.
What if we truly are infinite beings? There's no fear of death. There's no nothing. We don't have bodies. There's no adventure. Would this reality make sense for a simulation that something like that would make?
That's basically what you're saying is that's how we pass our time away. We're infinite beings with nothing to win or lose, so we throw ourselves into this simulation to pass the time away.
And honestly, I think this solves some problems, like with our existence that we're looking at. Like, why do bad things happen to good people? Things like why, because, say, like, if you believe in God, why would God let bad things happen to good people?
Right. Yeah.
But if it's all a simulation, if it's like God's the programmer, he put us in this, it makes more sense, right?
That was actually a point that came up while I was reading up on the subject was, why do we have this? If we are in a simulation, why do we have this vision of a God? Did the programmer write that in? He must have. Or is it just a result of the running the simulation? That the code here ran its course that finally made us come here and go, there must be a higher power.
Or this thought is, say, what if heaven and hell and all that is at war? And they go, well, who's on what side? How do we test it? Let's run a simulation war instead. They put everybody in this existence. Over your life, you choose which side. The simulation runs out. You're back into heaven or hell.
Oh, and then you have to...
You made your decision.
Then you pick up the battle in reality.
Yeah, well, or that's how they're doing the war. It's like the old-fashioned wars, to where the two sides came together and just sent their champions instead of having the two sides duke it out and all these people die.
Right.
They just sent our two champions, like the David and Goliath story.
So basically what you're saying is that in this scenario, God and the devil are playing a game of chess. And whoever wins the game of chess wins.
Yeah, like the Job story. Like we're going to stick these people in the simulation and see if they choose you or me.
Yeah, right. So I guess the question comes to it now. What would you do? What pill would you take?
Well, that's the thing. It's like me, even now, starting to think like, am I in the Matrix? It's like I want to know.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like it scares me to know what if like I'm leaving all these things behind.
Right.
So honestly, I kind of think I think we almost have that red pill, blue pill thing already with death.
I was going to say that. That was going to be my answer, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say that I think death is taking the red pill.
Yeah, and you wake up.
You wake up, yeah. So it's kind of scary to actually think of it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, perhaps every day we live, we're deciding the blue pill. And when we finally decide that we're ready to see what happens, that's when we decide we're taking the red pill and we die.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an internal decision that we have to make.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps this can explain why so many young, healthy people die, or why, someone who drank and smoked and ate unhealthy lived to be 100 years old.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying. Like, I think the Matrix almost solves a lot of problems with our existence.
Right. It answers all these questions and paradoxes and inconsistencies
or injustices. They don't seem like that's such a big deal if the truth is this existence is a simulation for our true existence.
Right. Makes you wonder about what that true existence is and where and what will be our driving, motivations, because we won't be thinking about wearing that Nike t-shirt. We won't be worried about, the next big movie that's coming out or whatever. We won't even be worried about, are we going to get married? Are we going to have kids?
Well, look into our existence and this Nike t-shirt thing that we've talked about. What if this is a test like we were talking about earlier and kind of decides your status? They're running the simulation to see where you stand in the next world. Say like our reality is like we're being fed this thing of you need this Nike shirt, but kind of the reality, but you have this kind of knowledge that some poor kid in a sweatshop made.
Right.
And you go, but to get it, because I had this reality, I don't care that this kid in the sweatshop is making it.
Yeah.
And then what if that's a test? What if that's part of the simulation running out?
How do you pass that test?
How do you pass that test? Do you have sympathy? Do you go to the extreme of like, I'm going to go on a mission and liberate these kids from the thing, or do you buy the shirt and not think about it?
Right.
Or are you somewhere in between to where you buy a shirt made locally?
Yeah. Could we have just been the imagination, though, of an alien playing a video game?
Could be. Well, say now let's step back even farther into other beliefs and say reincarnation.
Oh, yeah.
Reincarnation would be like the whole, oops, I died, restart.
Right.
Potentially.
Yeah.
You're thinking the Matrix terms.
Yeah. How many lives do I have?
How many lives do I have?
Mario Brothers.
Yeah. Did
basically.
I do the turtle trick and I got hundreds of them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is hard, by the way.
It is hard, dude. I felt like an idiot.
Did you ever accomplish it?
I tried it on the Wii a little while back, and it's like even getting that turtle to die on the right step, I couldn't even do.
Just actually, I did it one time. But I only got like 10 or so lives. I jumped I did it just at the right time, and it went boom, and that was it. But and actually, when you get that many lives, it gave me like a little blue diamond.
Yeah, and so I saw somebody do it, and it was actually a little kid, and it was my uncle, and he held the controller with his two fingers instead of his thumbs, and he got it up there, and you go through the different crowns, and so
that's what it was.
And we had something like crown times 53 or something like that.
Yeah,
he just did it for a long time, and he said, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
But the thing that's kind of sad is that me and my cousin, we're probably, I don't know, we were young. I'm 6, 7, 8. Couldn't beat the game with that many lives.
Well, what's funny though now is when you look at it, you don't need that many lives to beat the game.
No.
Now I could actually run through that game and beat it probably in like an hour.
Yeah.
Because you just there's a handful of warp pipes.
Yeah.
Yep, and you just go right to 8 and boom, 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 you're done.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway, we're talking about video games. What if somebody else is playing that video game on us?
What if we are the video game? Right. How many lives do they have? I'm going to go find that turtle shell
Yeah.
and fucking jump on the step
to
get it.
Yeah, and so, but like going as far as like there's a lot of people that believe in reincarnation. I think a lot of people in India believe that, and there's millions of people in India.
Well, yeah, I think isn't reincarnation a big? It's a Hindu in the Hindu religion, right?
Yeah, and there's the whole status thing of you're whatever, like a flea if you did bad in one life.
Right.
You're
a cow.
Cow if you did
right.
good.
Isn't cow the top of the line?
I think it is. Yeah, and
which is interesting to think about. I mean, who wants to come back as a cow? But
can you imagine what they think of Americans freaking eating McDonald's hamburgers all the time and they consider cows like these?
Right. Yeah, they must. Well, I mean, you would think that they would have to wonder about that, right? Because what if they came back as a cow, but in America?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. on a farm that becomes a McDonald's hamburger.
Right. I mean, they're treated terribly, and I feel horrible eating hamburgers, although...
Or they're the cow that becomes veal.
Yeah, where they're basically, eaten as children. And actually, this can bring another point, kind of along the line of what The Matrix was about. I mean, what if that's what we are? We're food for aliens, but they keep us in this hyper-reality so that we don't struggle. And so they can slaughter us when they're ready to eat us. Cook us up, Yep. But I mean, that would assume that we had physical bodies and what those physical bodies were. And because that brings up a whole other question, right?
Are we slaves, type of thing?
Well, it's, if this is a reality, and I'm looking at you and you look like this, and I look in the mirror and I see this, what are we in that reality?
Yeah.
Are we even, do we have arms and legs that can flail about? Or...
Are we like a veal in a cage?
Yeah, or are we, brains in a jar? Are we, bugs in a fucking bag? Whatever. Are we freaking like big broccolis that have been plugged into electrodes?
Yeah. Well, and another thing, say like this hyper reality we've talked about, kind of bringing it back into our existence. Do you think without hyper reality we'd go to war? I think that you could get, because say like if you, without say like politics, propaganda, made up borders.
I mean,
if you dropped me into the Middle East and I walked along and ran into a sheep farmer, would I be like, oh, I need to kill this guy?
Right. That's a very good point. But I mean, maybe that's just our personalities, because I think, to me, war should never be the answer. And I remember having a conversation with my dad when I was younger, and because I was always against war. Like, I don't know, I've just always been more about peace, But my dad made the point that sometimes there's a reason to go to war, and he has valid points. Like we're going in to protect people who need protection. But why did they need protection in the first place? Why did whoever was attacking those people want to attack those people? Why did Hitler decide he wanted to annihilate the Jews?
Yeah, and why did so many people follow him?
Why? Yeah.
That's the thing that blows my mind.
Right. Like, these are just human beings, just like everybody else. What made them think that was the right thing to do?
But then you flip it, like how many people followed him. What if the U.S. going to the Middle East is like Hitler going into freaking Europe?
Right, and we basically we're just sitting here thinking one thing when another thing is happening.
Yeah, and it's almost like these hyper realities, right?
Right.
It's like we think we're these crusaders, but no matter what war you do, you're going in there and you're killing people and all that stuff. But
well,
the thing,
this is you're making a good point to where it doesn't have to be a science fiction movie, and it doesn't have to be mystical for us to really be living in a simulation, because. Just because our physical bodies are real doesn't mean that what we see and what we take in is real. TV, news, advertising, all of that has created a reality that we've accepted that might not necessarily be true. Yeah. Like you said with the Nike, we don't really need that Nike shirt, but we buy it because it's advertised and because Michael Jordan wears it and because that's what we're supposed to do to fit in with everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, and also say, like, we talked about the test, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Cars have become so ingrained in our reality.
Yes. Right.
Now, the Middle East has become a melting pot of the world because of this. Now, what if we had this choice of, like, well, you could go back to the days of covered wagons, and there's no more there's a war, and these people aren't dying.
So you could drop into a different time period.
Yeah. How many people would choose to not have their cars?
Question is are we just taking the test over and over again? And that's where that whole reincarnation thing comes in. We took the test 10,000 years ago, in the time of the pyramids. We took it, in the Middle Ages. We took it in the, cowboys and Indians time, and now we're taking it in this time. Because maybe they're tallying up the score.
Yeah.
Maybe we did good in the pyramid days, but we did really bad in the medieval times.
Yeah.
And now here we are again in this age, and we're taking the test over again.
You remember the Captain Pike Star Trek? Like the pilot?
Yes.
Versus those aliens basically watching them in a simulation?
No, was that in the movie?
The pilot of the original series.
Oh, the pilot episode.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, those big-headed guys are putting him in a simulation, basically.
Yeah.
And watching him play it out.
Right. Did they watch him do it over and over again?
They put him in different things.
Different scenarios.
And they had this girl that looked really beautiful and everything, but the reality was she had been badly damaged in a spaceship crash.
Yeah, right.
And so they're creating this reality.
Oh, they had him in a cage, right?
Yeah.
It was almost like he was a zoo animal.
Yeah,
And he kept running into the wall trying to get out.
And then all of a sudden he'd be in these realities, and then you get to a point and go, this isn't real, wake me up from this.
Yeah, right. I remember that. That's right.
And so that's another possibility, is just we're like in a fishbowl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're playing this out.
Yeah, and in one, rabbit hole I went down was talking about, well, what if these people that you drive by on the road aren't really, they're not even really real. They're just a computer program. The farther away you get from yourself, the less they even matter. Like you mentioned, 3,000 people die across the world. It doesn't matter, but, somebody close to you, and it does. Mm-hmm. And it's like, they were just programmed. They weren't even real. It was just a peripheral, it's like when you're driving around in a video game in like Grand Theft Auto, and you get to the edge of the screen. You can see the outlines of the buildings, but you can't go into those buildings because that hasn't been developed yet.
You're running to an invisible wall.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another thing that's kind of interesting is when we choose to play video games, the type of video games we choose to play. Because say like we're sitting here going, war is not the answer.
Yeah.
Like we're being propaganded into wars. And
right.
All that stuff. But if we play a video game, we choose to play Call of Duty.
We've got big guns. We've got swords, and we're chopping people up.
Yeah. So what if, say like this whole thing, say like we're getting stuck in this simulation, instead of say like these higher beings, whatever. Say instead of having people kill each other, go to war, we'll stick them in the simulation. They can play it out.
Right.
Type of thing. So maybe we are not actually warrior like people, but when we play video games, we are.
Yeah. Right. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you think we've said enough on this subject?
I confused myself today. Because, yes, seriously.
I've blown my mind as well. Or actually, you blew my mind with your topics of, vast knowledge.
Did you finish junior college knowledge?
Yes, you're failed out of community college degree that you have.
A community college that's failing in the community college system.
Oh, shit, even worse.
Yeah.
Thank you, America.
Yes.
All right, that's the podcast. Follow us on Twitter at DGTassPodcast.
And also, if you watch us on YouTube and you want to hear us talk about something, just comment.
Comment away, and subscribe.
Subscribe, watch all our videos 20 times.
All right.